First off, I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone so much for coming and being here today. My name is Cami Tusi. I'm a representative of the Maimonides Society here at HMS and HSDM. And I think just looking around the room and seeing so many faces and seeing so much community is quite beautiful. So thank you for taking time out of your day to be here and to hear some of the stories of our panelists and what they're living through.
I'm the deputy manager of the hospital. And that morning, Saturday morning, I was in my house. It's like 40 minutes from the hospital. And I woke up from a siren. And I didn't understand what was happening, because basically when there's a certain situation, like some sort of a terror attack or some sort of a military situation, we know about it like a day, 2 days, 3 days before that. We have some time to prepare ourselves, the hospitals. And this time it was in the center of the country. So I really didn't understand what was happening. And I woke up at 6:30 in the morning and I just didn't know what was happening and I couldn't receive any information. So what happened to me and to the rest of the staff, that we took our bags and we just drove to the hospital. And just to emphasize what happened during this way, I had to stop 7 times because I was under rockets and to lie on the ground. And when I reached the hospital, I couldn't get to the major building because there were so many rockets that when I went out of my car, I had to lie on the ground. So at that day, we received over 300 injured people in a very, very short period of time. That was the first thing. And they came, like they kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And usually when you work in the ER, you see some sort of an end of things if you had like a severe car accident or even a terrorist attack. But this one they just kept on coming and coming, and people came with multi-organ injuries with very complex injuries, and we just kept on working and working. We knew that there was no choice. You just have to work and work and work. And I think at some point in the afternoon, people were working and they were strong and they were working, but they were crying. So you could see a person from the staff crying and then continuing his work.
Boca Medical Center is one of the largest medical centers in Israel and very well trained, as are the other medical centers in the South in such events. We train constantly for mass casualty incidents, prepare for numbers. The largest mass casualty event we ever saw was about 150 injured in one day. In drills, we're expected at about 300 casualties, to say no more. That's our capacity. And Shabbat saw us at 680 by midnight and 700 by the next morning, which is far beyond anything we've ever experienced. We lost Dr. Eitan Ne'eman. We lost many people, but I'll share his story. Dr. Eitan Ne'eman was, and it's extremely difficult to speak of him in past tense, a pediatric intensive care specialist who I've known for many years. And he worked with us in the trauma unit all of Shabbat morning, caring for wounded patients. The first patient he saw was a Bedouin child, a Muslim Bedouin child, 8, who was shot in his abdomen after seeing his father killed in front of his eyes. And he moved from patient to patient, helping with adults as he finished, if there was a lull where there were no pediatric patients. At around noon, he got called up for reserve service and went off to the army, where he was killed in action the next day. He will be greatly missed. Dr. Daniel Levy, a specialist in ear, nose, and throat, lived in Be'eri. In the morning, as attack started, he put his wife and 2 young daughters in their shelter in their home and ran to the clinic to try and provide care for anyone who might be wounded. Spent the whole day there in the clinic until 2:30, when whatever guns they still had ran out of bullets. The clinic was overrun. Grenades were thrown into it, and everyone who was in the clinic died. Israel is indeed a very diverse society. In the south, in the Beersheba area, the southern district, the large area we cover for, about a third of the population are Muslim Bedouin. They also make up a large number of the staff in the Israeli hospitals in the south. At our medical center, it's about a sixth of the staff, about 17% of physicians. And they were targeted and attacked, certainly civilians, but also physicians and nurses and other medical personnel felt under attack as part of Israeli society during this horrible day. The first patient we operated on was a Bedouin woman, a pregnant woman at week 36, who had a gunshot injury to her abdomen. And her surgical report reads, the fetus is not breathing, but has a pulse and has a gunshot wound to the lower abdomen. It's a surgical report I'm going to keep. And this is a Bedouin woman who was shot while the people shooting her knew she was Bedouin. It wasn't a random, let's accidentally shoot someone. So they were certainly targeted as Israeli citizens, as part of our great Israeli society that is diverse and is inclusive.
Dr. West, can you also please tell us about some of your experiences? What makes this attack different from previous terrorist attacks in Israel, and what the emergency department looks like right now?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. I was actually on call on the Black Saturday, so I was on my way into work anyway. Our shift starts at 7 o'clock. And like Dr. Bergman said, we woke up to the alarms. We realized that there was a very heavy artillery attack. But actually, when I got to work, I had some of my workers who were already receiving footage on the social media in real time of people being murdered and people being kidnapped. And so while we were realizing that we were under heavy artillery fire, already by 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, we were beginning to realize this was much more than that. We were actually physically ourselves seeing civilians being killed and being kidnapped. And whilst it was going on, we were receiving more and more patients, and they were very seriously wounded. All of them pretty much were very seriously or moderately wounded. There was very few lightly wounded people. And meanwhile, we were trying to contact our staff, because a lot of our staff lives in the settlements around the south. One of my doctors was actually locked in her sealed room for 24 hours with her 1.5-year-old daughter. Her husband, who's a first responder, heard the shots around them and went out to try and save some of his neighbours. A lot of our staff actually couldn't even come in because they were trapped in their houses. So meanwhile, people were contacting friends and family in between patients coming in. It was apocalyptic. It really was. It was something like we've never experienced before, and there was this sense of uncertainty, of shock, and of also horror, because normally when patients come in and they've been injured, there's a relief when they come in. They're like, oh, thank God, now I'm in good hands. I can relax and you look after me. And the patients were coming in and saying, all of my friends are dead. They were killing everybody around me. Let me go back. What are you doing? Why are you treating me? I want to go back. Everybody's dying. And we didn't even have time to say, what are you talking about? We just had to keep working and keep treating them. But bit by bit, we were realizing that this was a tragedy of the scale and a catastrophe of the scale that we've never seen before. And it went on all day. What was even scarier was a couple of days. It went on all day and it went on the next day. But already by Monday, there was this lull, there was this quiet. And I called up the home front and I said, where are the patients? Why aren't they coming in? And we realized that because what they were doing by Monday, Tuesday already was really sorting out the dead. One of our doctors was actually involved in 9/11, and he was there when it happened. And he was one of the people who was built up a field hospital. And he said they put together a field hospital and everybody's all, getting ready to receive the wounded. And there was this lull, and none of the wounded arrived because they were all dead. And that's when it really hit us. And that's when we realized, because when you're in action and you're treating patients, you've got the adrenaline and you don't have enough time to think. But when it's 2 days later and you realize that all the people who hadn't come in by then were actually in all of these 1,400 people, or there was about 1,100 at the time that hadn't come in, are dead, then you only begin to realize the scale of things. And then the stories start coming in. And one of our doctors, 2 of his first cousins were killed, and a very close friend of mine already found out on Sunday that his daughter and his son-in-law and his 2 grandsons were killed. And the horrors and the atrocities just kept pouring in. But to talk about the patients that are coming in now is also it's something that we didn't anticipate. I mean, we expected people to come in with acute stress reactions and acute stress disorders. But first of all, we're seeing so much more than that. We're seeing psychoses. We're seeing we've had 2 patients who came in who thought who came in from the festival that was in Berry, but a week and a half later, both within a couple of days of each other, totally psychotic, convinced they were still under fire, convinced we were Hamas, and all the doctors and all the nurses were shooting at them. And now we have a whole generation. We have thousands of new survivors of a very, very fresh Holocaust, which included in it every single atrocity that they managed to include over 6 years, as if there was a checklist from, well, we've beheaded children, so now let's hang up 3- and 4-year-olds in front of their parents, beat them to death and then shoot them. Let's burn children in front of the parents. Now let's shoot parents in front of their children. Let's mutilate bodies and switch their body parts. Every single one of those have done. We've got a generation of new Holocaust survivors alongside a generation of new bereaved parents. And that's going to be a huge challenge that I do not believe is going to be over in the next year or 2 years. I think it's something that we are going to have to develop the skills to deal with on a very, very long term. And every survivor has got to tell his story. And every person who works in Zaka, like the rabbi in my synagogue, who he has to look at the bodies and decide whether to go to the parents and tell them that you do or don't want to identify your child because they're so mutilated beyond belief, it will be so traumatic for you. This needs to come out. So we need you to support us and help us be strong. We seem to only be in favor when we're weak, but we need to be strong because we have to survive, and we need you to help us spread the word, because there's nothing more offensive than going through what we've gone through and then being told, like we were told after the Holocaust, that we made the whole thing up.